Is now a good time to sell your property is a question I keep getting asked, and even more so recently, along with the question, are we in a property boom and is it about to crash? Is now a good time to sell? I think that's kind of a loaded question because it depends on the location, depends on the property itself, the sector that's in, and also why you want to sell. And I can't answer that question without sitting down with you and exploring all the options. And I think that's why I've kind of avoided making this video up until now. If you do want to book a consultation with me, you can send me an email outlining your situation and I can see if I can fit you in. But hopefully this video will be able to answer some of your questions and you won't have to email me. But before I dive into any great detail, I think it's important that you ask yourself some questions, some whys, whats, and hows, and write some of these down and answer some of these questions yourself. Like, why do I want to sell? Why do I want to move? And why do I think now is a good time to actually sell? If you do sell, what will you do with the cash? What will you buy or invest in instead? What will happen if the market does crash, or what will happen if the market doesn't actually crash either? How much will it cost you to sell? Will you need to rent? How much tax will you have to pay? This list could go on, but I think first off, it's important to understand what selling means to you, because you are the only one who can answer that question. Does selling to you mean that you're going to have to buy another home? Will you have to rent for a period? Will you be able to get the same interest rates that you're currently paying? Will your borrowing costs increase on a new home? Will this increase make it worthwhile actually moving? Does selling for you mean selling an investment property? The first question I would ask is, what do you plan to do with the cash once you have sold it? Does it mean putting the money into a bank and letting inflation eat away at that cash? Or do you have alternative investment opportunities at hand? If you plan to buy a different investment property with the cash, will you be able to get a better return after you've sold and you've counted in for acquisition costs and you've counted in for all the tax that you will be liable, and also perhaps your borrowing costs have also increased as well. If it means selling a residential investment property that's located in a rent pressure zone and the rental cap is quite low, perhaps now is a good time for you to sell if you can find a better investment opportunity, particularly when a lot of people feel that more restrictions on landlord are likely. If you are holding on to industrial property, perhaps that's worth keeping. If it's office or retail, it will largely depend on the lease structure itself and the future development and use opportunities within that property. I was thinking about petrol stations yesterday. The increase in fuel costs sparked a few thoughts. I think the move to electric will happen far faster. Petrol stations will start closing, but will limited availability of petrol stations make the existing petrol stations or the remaining petrol stations more valuable, or will investors be scared that more petrol stations will actually close and therefore the values will come down? Perhaps there's an opportunity to pick up petrol stations now that have future development potential for residential down the line, if you're willing to buy into a petrol station that has maybe 5-10 years left on their lease. An interesting side note on fuel costs, I've heard from a few people, granted only a small few people, that moved out of the city during lockdown and were hoping for the remote working, are now returning to their office, and all of a sudden they're discovering with the increase in fuel costs that any savings that they got from moving out of the cities have been eaten away, and they're actually considering moving back to the cities because of fuel costs. A lot of agents won't welcome me saying this, but I don't think right now is a good time to sell unless you are a landlord of a residential property in a rent pressure zone and the rental cap is below market value. Supply is still very low and I don't see that changing dramatically over the next year or two. Demand will weaken, but I still think there's a lot of demand from lots of different sectors. A big issue perhaps for homeowners who are considering selling or trading up or trading down, they'll have to consider their borrowing costs and is it worthwhile moving out of perhaps a mortgage that's on a far lower interest rate than they might be able to get in the market right now, and that will impact supply down the line and it will impact people's decisions to move as well right now. Selling and moving into the rental market is less favorable in many cases. Selling an investment property only makes sense if you have a better alternative for your capital, unless the investment property has limited future use and limited future value. But the important thing is to consider, on the investment side, is the long-term value of the property. As the question to sell can rely on multiple factors, and many of those factors are personal, this video was never going to answer all of those questions, but I hope it provided you with some details in terms of some of the questions you might need to ask yourself before you decide to sell. If you need to reach out to me or you want to sign up to our monthly newsletter, please see the details below. And as always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and show your support by liking the video.